Thanks everybody for joining. We've got a really cool panel today. We're going to be talking about digital therapeutics, but not just the technology, really the human story behind the technology. So I want to welcome a really incredible panel with us here today. Nimita Limaye from IDC. She's going to join from the industry analyst perspective. We have Viveca Livezey, who is joining us from Click Therapeutics. She is the Senior Vice President of Clinical Development. And we have Anne Marie Mercurio, who joins us from the patient perspective as an ongoing and really outspoken advocate for patient insights and patient rights. So we're here today, as I said, to talk about digital therapeutics. This room is a little bit heavily weighted, so I'm going to love the hands in the air. Who is familiar with digital therapeutics in the room already? All right, fantastic. We won't have to do too much of the baseline, but I think we really have come to a pivotal moment for a variety of reasons. Technology advancements, expectations of decentralized patient healthcare, recently released FDA draft guidance around prescription drug user-related software. All of these are really combining into a space where digital therapeutics and software-enhanced drugs are not just an option, but I think an imperative for industry leaders and advanced companies looking to drive forward what is possible in terms of patient care. So we're going to have a little bit of an evolution today. We're going to talk about the why behind the patient story. We're going to talk about the how, and then we're really going to bring it home as to how these sorts of technologies are pushing the needle in terms of patient empowerment and changing the patient journey. So let's go ahead and kick off today. I think in terms of getting us started, there's no better person to start us with than Anne Marie. Anne Marie, can you get us started on that why? Help us understand some of the real world challenges that patients are facing today as they are seeking treatment, as they are seeking access to clinical care and treatments beyond.
So being diagnosed with anything that requires medical care creates a situation where the top of your head blows off, and now you're trying to find answers, and you don't know if you're finding answers from reliable sources. I can go back to, like, with myself, my mom, and knowing I should only be looking at .org sites, only to find out years later I could buy a .org site. So how reliable is the information? What's happening now with all of the technology that's available, there's an opportunity to make sure that we're meeting patients where they are with the information that they need. So I'm calling it precision technology is the way I'm gonna refer to this, to ensure that whatever is available is taken advantage of by the patient and allows for the best possible outcome and the best decision at decision points in time throughout the trajectory of a treatment, disease, clinical trial, no matter what it is. If it's in the healthcare space, we should have access to it in our hands. So,
in some of your more maybe traditional experience before some of these technologies were available to us, can you describe a time where you felt that disempowerment, where the choice was taken away from you, or where you didn't feel like you had that voice?
So I recently moved, and when I was packing up my home, I found buckets and buckets of paper. And I went down a terrible rabbit hole of trying to read what was on there. There was important information from over 15 years ago that was buried on a piece of paper that I really need now. So now there's pictures on my phone, hopefully that's gonna, but again, nothing is in a medical record, nothing is in an app, nothing is anywhere where it's all in one place. And when you're trying to, specific to what we're talking about today here, when you're trying to navigate through something, having information in one place where okay, this is going to help you get your head in the right place to be able to do something. This is what your medication schedule should be looking like. This is when your next appointment is. The possibilities are endless to make this easier for people and not be, I remember living in the land of the overwhelmed. Okay, you have over the course of the next 2 weeks, there are 8 different doctor appointments at 4 different locations, and I can't keep it straight other than on a piece of paper. That's not optimal. We have technology to fix all of this stuff.
Yeah.
to say nothing of what does my care look like? So
that's, it's a challenge, I'm sure, Dr. Livezey, Viveca, that you know all too well. You've been a clinician. You've heard the refrains, is this as good as it gets? Have I exhausted all my options? What else is left for me? How does that refrain come into play? And maybe how has that brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So as a clinician, I don't think of just treating the patient in terms of like just, okay, this is your disease. Let's start you on this medication. See you in 3 months. Good luck, right? Like I want to treat the whole patient. I want this holistic approach. I want that as a clinician, and I know that patients want that. And so, like, for example, I'm a neurologist. I've been treating migraine for 20 years. So when someone comes in with a migraine, I might start them on some medicines, but I'm also going to ask them, what are the triggers for your migraine? How are you sleeping? What's your stress level? Are you exercising? What's your caffeine intake? So there's a lot of different factors that go into my care of the patient, say with migraine, just as one example. And so we know that pharmacology, like pharmacological treatment options, can target, say, one mechanism of action or two. They can treat the symptoms. Maybe they could even be curative, right? But it's still not treating the whole patient, right? The cognitive, the behavioral, the psychosocial, the lifestyle factors. And that's where I think digital technologies really can come in and shape like the future of how we take care of our patients. So, at Click Therapeutics, right now we have 2 FDA cleared devices. So these are digital therapeutics that have been reviewed, regulated by the agency in order to and have demonstrated through clinical data that they do what they say they're going to do. So one is for, major depressive disorder, and one is for the preventive treatment of migraine, which is why I was really excited to join Click, because this is something that's really interesting to me. And so these therapies are able to kind of fill in those gaps that traditional pharmacology isn't able to do, and complement it and augment care for the patients. And then we know we can also incorporate other measures, like things like adherence, things like reminders for doctors' visits. We can do so much more with this technology. And this isn't like the future, this is now. We can do these things now, and we can incorporate these changes now. So it's very exciting to be a physician in the space.
So I'm just going to tag on and say thank you for giving back control, because there is nothing more that happens in a person's life when they're trying to navigate through any sort of situation that's debilitating to them, is that sense of a complete loss of control, and any semblance of control that can be given back to a patient through the use of technology, whether it's and I'm not a fan of some of the, buy this app. If it was prescribed to me from a doctor that I trusted, I would be far more, there would be a far higher level of confidence in and willingness to use. So thank you for giving back patients control with that.
And Dr. Limaye, Nimita, you have a great pulse on the industry, both from who you talk to and the research that you do. What I hear from this is a market driving push, especially, one of the trends we see is how much of healthcare is moving into the hands of patients, is driven by them now. I have to imagine that this is a driving force in companies, pharmaceutical organizations, medical device organizations, feeling this push towards something that, again, drives more empowerment to the patients. How are you seeing this surface within the organizations that you survey?
It's a great question. And I just refer back to a conversation that we were having a few minutes ago before we just came on stage, and we're talking about the Aura Ring, right, Ariana? And how many people use one? Okay, a couple of those. I know my son uses it as well, and I was telling her, I was like, he looks at it and he says, oh, it says I'm getting stressed. I need to stop work now. I was like, okay, this is an interesting thing. I don't think I ever did that. But the fact is that as patients, I think we're becoming a lot more empowered, a lot more demanding. I remember before the pandemic, during the pandemic, everything went remote. And then after the pandemic got over, my provider's assistant called me up to schedule the physical. And I was like, can I do it remotely? And she literally blasted me. She said, ma'am, it's a physical. And my son, unfortunately, was in the room and he was laughing. He was like, what were you thinking? But as I told him, I said, hey, buddy, it's not going to be so far away where we can do all of this remotely, right? Companies like Medidata are going to enable that, right? And just think about the patient experience. I mean, I don't want to spend 3 hours walking into the office, sitting there and doing what, a physical, I mean, with by no means undermining the importance of that. But the expectation, as I would say, the patient experience is almost reaching a level of consumerization, where I'm demanding that I want a different lifestyle. I'm expecting things on my fingertips. I'm expecting to participate in decision making. The speed at which now you look up, I think it was mentioned in the morning as well in the keynote, the speed at which you're looking up information that your provider is providing with you is like, okay, is it right? Is it wrong? What are the options? Right? So it is, I think it's a changing landscape for patients. It's a far more digitally savvy provider landscape, where I think the adaptation has also changed. The expectations have changed. If you look at the payer community, there's a totally different field over there. The demand for data, and unfortunately, randomized clinical trials, as great as they are still giving you episodic snapshots of data. Whereas when you start digging deeper into real world evidence, it's a totally different landscape. If you want to look at specialty, you look at cell and gene therapies, where the cost is really huge. And there is a demand from the payer community for reimbursement, for coverage, for the appropriate placement in the formulary. You need the data, you need the evidence. I really think that digital therapeutics can play a phenomenal role in enabling that. And really, it's going to be about the data, it's going to be about the patient experience. And finally, I think it's a race for innovation, right? Every country, I would say the US was the leader in innovation. It's kind of being challenged by geographies like China today. But there is that race, and how do you continue to keep up to speed with all the disruption that's happening in the world right now? I'm not going to go into all of that. I think we all know what's going on. But with the disruption that's happening, it's really going to be technology that's going to be the game changer. And for patients, I think you very aptly described the fact that, hey, thank you for putting control in our hands. I think what digital therapeutics can do is phenomenal.
I think you touch on an interesting point that the US used to be the lead for innovation. We would certainly like to see that continue to be the case, but I think I'm hearkening back to some of the discussions from this morning about how we need to continue to evolve and we need to continue to innovate. But we have not been the leaders of technology uptake, we being our industry. And I think this is going to be an interesting shift. And you mentioned, why do I have to come into the clinician office? Why do I have to come in to let you do a 6-minute walk test when I could just have that evaluated via my wearables? How does that start to influence the rate of change and the rate of uptake of change of clinical trials as well? I think it all exists on a continuum here that's really going to increase the pressure.
I just on the word that you used, continuum. I think that's also a critical piece of it, right? I mean, getting that longitudinal perspective of a patient's life. I think that's a very important piece as well.
Yeah, how do we continue with them? How do we start with them in normal clinician setting, progress with them to where they may or may not be in a clinical trial at some point in their life, and then eventually they are out of them and we continue that relationship with them. So important. So talk to me, let's maybe shift from some of that driving of the why into the how. So Viveca, if you could share with me and with the group a little bit more of the science. So as we think about digital therapeutics and software enhanced drugs, they're not just apps. We're not talking about companion apps. We're really talking about actually being able to affect mechanisms of action, right? And how does that compare and contrast with what the drug is doing, and where do we see that synergistic benefit?
Yeah, sure. So when Click Therapeutics designs one of its software as a medical device apps, we're really incorporating evidence-based therapies into a manner that you can access through your app on your phone. And so we are taking these, so for example, we could take a module such as cognitive restructuring, which is, taking a negative thought and then making it into a more neutral one, and we digitize it, put it into this app, and then we add it along with other modules. So for example, it could be, improving sleep hygiene. It could be, drug optimization. It could be many other factors. And we also have like neuromodulatory pathways that we're trying to modify, and Click has studied these extensively. So we do what's similar to these early feasibility, we call clinical learning studies, in order to understand how a patient might respond to some of these individual modules, and also how they interact with the interface. You know, is it an interface that patients like? Do they form an alliance with it? Do they believe in it? Do they have that trust with it that they're going to go back and want to interact with it? And so there's all these different mechanisms that we use that we digitize, and then we study them in a very rigorous manner. So, you know, though I'm very excited about digital technologies, I think it's really important that we also regulate it and do it in a safe way for patients. And as a clinician, that's first and foremost in my mind, right? And so that's what we do. We all our, you know, digital therapeutics undergo, you know, randomized control trial testing the same way a drug therapy would do, and we test them as adjuncts to drug therapies. And so we're looking at this in a really rigorous manner to make sure that we have the most effective and safe options for patients out there. And then to your point about the sensors and the future of all this, I think it's really exciting to think that patients can be very empowered by it. You know, everyone, I took off my Apple Watch, but I was wearing it earlier. And, you know, everyone's collecting all this sensor data through their rings, through their bands, through their watches. And, you know, but they're just getting the data. They're not sure what to do with it. And you can Google it. Like my son told me last night, oh, well, I can just go on to like, you know, ChatGPT and ask it what I can do with blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but this is like, you know, how is the clinician being informed by that? So we're not trying to replace the clinician because, you know, I'm a clinician. I don't want to be replaced, but I want to augment my care. I want to make it better. I want to make it more streamlined, more efficient for me, better for my patients, so they have better outcomes. And, you know, we can use the data from our sensors. We can use our digital therapeutics. We can optimize adherence, optimize all these different factors that are important for patients to have good outcomes. And then we can kind of be part of the life cycle of the patient, like beyond the clinical trial, right? So maybe the clinical trial is that first interaction with a digital therapeutic, or having your sensor data input and then output in a different way. But then the goal would be to create like this closed loop system where you're able to go back to the patient and actually alter outcomes for the patient to be better. So that is where we are definitely headed. And we don't want America to fall behind in that. So.
Yeah. Are you jumping in? I feel like you are.
Yeah. Yes, I am, because what you're doing is giving me a vote in what I need to do to make sure my health is as optimal as it can be without passing judgment. What I want to jump in and say is, you know, the CLIC team came to the Patient Insights Board and went through what it's planning for oncology. And it was so impactful, first of all, to see all of the pre-work that went on before these storyboards came to us. Like nothing is written in code yet. It was, this is what we're thinking. This is the way we want to bring people. And there were 11 of us in that session giving feedback that it was blowing my mind, because I'm like, this is going to be prescribed to somebody that's walking into a clinical trial to be able to help them participate literally 24 hours a day. Because I come into clinic, you know, probably too frequently, but that's a story for another day. But if it says that I have to be in there every 3 weeks or every 2 weeks, that's when my doctor is seeing me for that 20 minutes that I'm in front of them. And I'm living my life these other 2 weeks of time. And I will guarantee an emergency is going to happen at 5:05 on a Friday when the office is closed. And I don't know what to do. So here's information that will say, these side effects are things you should be worried about. These, not so much. If your temperature just went up a little bit. And everything that I'm mentioning now is stuff that was presented and said, we're thinking about this. Do you think this would be helpful? The whole room was like, it's all helpful. Figure out a way to get it all in there. So, you know, and that's not something that I would be able to go to the App Store and just download and say, I want that. I know it's being looked at, it's being studied, it's being approved regulatory wise. And my doctor is telling me, here's something that's going to help make your experience better. So.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, you know, there are tens and thousands of these apps you can download on the App Store for health. And over 50% of Americans are downloading these apps to help them. So it could be nutrition, it could be, you know, what exercise regimen should I use? It could be, how do I sleep better? How do I, like, you know, monitor my stress or my, you know, emotions? But they really haven't been regulated at all. So it's very important, you know, that we kind of educate people about some of these risks. And, you know, when we do study our different therapeutics, we do all, like I said, the clinical learning studies to understand how are patients going to, you know, respond with this interface? Does it work for them? Like the patient is at the center of everything we do, the science, the patient. And I think that's what sets apart some of the companies that are trying to like really, have be distinct in this space.
Yeah, and I think it's been a great part of the partnership that Click has had with Medidata to be able to bring the Patient Insights Board that we've had for a number of years now into the relationship to facilitate some of the investigation that you're talking about, Anne Marie, because the patient voice into what you're designing is so incredibly important. Nimita, we've already looked as well about the ability to demonstrate, as we said, there's a clinical significance to this. And that's a game changer to elevate these beyond just companion apps. As Viveca said, there's thousands of those. So what's the difference between what's cluttering up the app store right now and the difference between digital therapeutics and software enhanced drugs? So how critical do you think that the FDA's guidance on PDRS has been in terms of creating that clear pathway to gaining the benefit that we're talking about? And what does that mean as a drug company is thinking about their own particular commercial strategy? How does that draft guidance help them figure out where and how aggressively to invest into this?
That's interesting. I think it's been absolutely critical in multiple ways. On one side, it's, to Viveca's point, about, hey, you and I, we all go download various apps just to say, hey, this looks good. Maybe it's going to make a difference to my life. But how much of it is regulated? How do I really know that it is going to make only a positive difference and not have some other consequences? I think the good part about PDRS is it's talking about clinically meaningful benefit, which is a huge piece, which is fundamentally say scientifically prove that this is really providing a benefit to an individual. And I think that regulation, to your point of saying there are thousands of apps there, being able to drill down and say, what do I really trust, is making a difference to patients. And I think it will really help guarantee better safety for patients. Yeah. The other aspect, you raised a point about the commercial benefit to pharma, I think is also very significant. There are multiple pieces to it. I think first thing is you don't need to go in for a full NDA if you already have a drug out there. It can be a supplemental NDA. So the efficiency that comes into the picture, the cost efficiencies and the time are both significant. I think the other piece also is if you look at the number of drugs that are losing loss of exclusivity is huge. I mean, if you look at numbers being quoted, you're talking of $192 billion going down the drain by from 24 to 28, which in fact is double. That's a McKinsey number, and that's double the amount that was lost in the previous 4 years. So you're talking of significant loss of exclusivity and impact. Can I actually use this now as a coupled, for label extension and to effectively extend the life of my drug? That's a huge opportunity, which I definitely think pharma will weigh in on.
Yeah. And then I just want to add from the, there's obviously a marketing perspective and a commercial perspective, but from the patient or the clinician perspective, say I have a treatment that I'm only giving once every 3 months, like if I'm doing injections or getting an infusion, what is my patient doing in those 12 weeks in between, right? And so it's nice to know that there's a digital therapeutic, for example, that gives you a therapy for 12 weeks. It's actually going to change your outcomes and improve your monthly migraine days, for example, or improve your scores on depression rating scales, or, for our recent, and you guys will, hear this data presented tomorrow for the top level data on our digital therapeutic that we're partnering with Boehringer Ingelheim for schizophrenia and the negative symptoms, that this can actually help in those days in between where you might not be getting a treatment. So it gives patients another option. It's not this like one size fits all. It's not this 1 + 1 = 2. It may be 1 + 1 = 3, right? When we add a pharmacological therapy, because as I said before, all of our treatments were on top of adjunctive medication. So for schizophrenia, it was antipsychotics. For migraine, it was acute or chronic treatments for migraine. And for depression, it was on top of an antidepressant. That there's an increased benefit to patients also, and so and then, how does that tie into the future of sensors and sending things back to patients? It's better outcomes for patients. So I think that's really, that's really
Anne Marie, I feel you jumping in.
Yeah, because it's not about the medication that I'm taking for literally a split second during the course of a day. It's I need to figure out a way to integrate this condition, disease, situation, whatever it is, into my life. And I mean, I got to give props to the team with the the schizophrenia therapeutic, because that is a population that is still being treated with literally 50-year-old drugs, that we have nothing better out there. And the team was able to demonstrate an increase in basically a quality of life metric for a population that there is literally nothing for. So, I mean, the promise of where this can go is it's mind-blowing from a patient perspective. I mean, I think about it like in the oncology space, which is where I primarily reside. And if I'm getting an infusion every 3 weeks, even within a clinical trial, what's happening within those visits? I'm living a life, and I'm trying to make sure I'm doing everything that my doctor told me to do. Eat healthy, try to walk. And then it's, you know what? This is a toxic drug. I don't care what you eat, just get calories in. So, and I walk out and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. And now it's my care is being augmented by information that's being put in the palm of my hand. So yeah, there's so much hope here for so many different populations.
That's fantastic. And I just want to remind everyone, in about 10 or so minutes, we're going to open it up to questions. So if anything has sparked an idea that you'd like to gain more of, please keep your questions at hand. We've talked a lot about why. We've talked now about the how. Let's kind of bring it back together. Anne Marie, I'm going to come right back to you, because the goal here, and you've touched on this just a bit, is transforming the totality of that patient experience, both during trial, post-trial, into their treatment. And the technology that we're looking at can shift that dynamic between, you talked about that one pill you're taking a day for, a brief period of time, but I'm shifting it from being a passive recipient of that to interacting now with something that makes me an empowered partner in that. So what does that mean for you? What does that mean for patients?
I became a member of the team that's caring for me. And I would argue, without my buy-in, nothing that you or anyone is going to do is going to make a difference. Because if I'm not stepping up and saying, all right, I need to find a way to be the best version of myself. I need to try to incorporate. Not every patient is going to be willing or want to incorporate every single suggestion. But you know what? You start small. And if you have all of these suggestions, okay, so you don't want to drink 8 glasses of water a day. Let's shoot for 3 for starters. There's ways to, and I know that that's the way these things are being built. It's not do it or you failed. It's here's how you can incrementally improve what you're doing so that you can be healthier. Not everybody's going to get there. Not everybody's going to reach the top of the mountain. I would argue most of us are not. But you know what? Any improvements that we can make, and there would be some things, I can incorporate more movement this week. I can eat healthier this week. I can't because I just need calories. And what's going on is it's one size fits none. There will be something for everyone when these things are built out properly. And I love that. I love that because you're giving control back to the patient and their caregivers, and you're allowing them to participate actively in the goals of the care and making sure that they're getting to the next phase of whatever that's going to look like for them. So.
Yeah, and I really, if I could jump in, I really appreciate you saying that, Anne Marie, because it went into so much of the thought of us building our different products. It was really that personalized journey for patients. So, for example, with the therapeutic with patients that might be a little bit less motivated. Okay, well, let's not do a module today that might be 20 minutes long. Let's do one that's only 5 minutes long, or let's just skip a day. So you can kind of personalize the care for the patient, which I think is something that's really unique, and you can only do it digital, with digital type therapeutics. So a lot of thought went into doing that. And even, for the migraine app, it was patients have photosensitivity. So, or they could have photosensitivity or light sensitivity during a migraine. And so the colors were chosen to be a little bit more neutral. Yeah. And then this concept of not focusing on the negative, I feel like as a parent, I'm probably focused on the negative with my kid, but the app sometimes feels like it's really telling you we're going to meet you where you're at today. And it's more positive reinforcement as opposed to the negative reinforcement. So,
and that is also potentially making a difference to the caregiver as well, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that empowerment that you as a patient have, I don't think people talk enough about the caregiver burden when you're treating a patient with a neurological disorder. And I think that's a huge piece that can also make a difference.
Well, and it has a huge impact, I would assume, on both trial participation and completion and adherence, as well as ultimately therapy adherence. You know, we know one of the key predictors of trial success is whether or not we could keep patients in the trial itself. And we've got 40% dropout rates, but I know you guys have had a huge effect on that. And similarly, the treatment in and of itself in the real world is only as effective as whether or not you are taking it and adhering to it. And a big part of that, Viveca, I'm going to take to you, is also the data collection and the feedback mechanisms that we're able to have. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the real time and real world data that we are able to collect by having these applications in and well engaged with the patient community, not just left on a desk and never touched again, but a key part of their therapy?
Right. So I think, we can collect all sorts of data, right, with these digital therapeutics, and we have to do it in a safe way. We have to make sure it's private. We have to make sure it's compliant. And that's something, we do very well. We make sure everything we do is adheres to all the rules, and make sure it's safe for patients and cybersecurity and everything. But we can collect data on patients, and I hate to keep talking about migraine, it's just my space, but, I want to say these principles can be applied to oncology trials, to GI studies, to anything. We have evidence to demonstrate that neuropsychiatric interventions and these various principles of adherence are relevant to basically most disease states. But to go back to that, we can collect real world data on frequency of events, let's say, on symptomatology, how severe the symptoms are, and we can create real world studies from this data in a post-market setting. And so there's a lot of potential with what we can do, and a lot of stuff that we're doing right now. So.
And Nimita, you touched on before some of the payer interest in some of this data. And we've traditionally had a bit of a data activation gap between what we are able to collect, what pharma companies have been able to bring into both a part of their analysis, a part of their trial. What are you seeing as the opportunity associated with this really high quality real world data associated to patients, to trial participants?
Yeah, I would say the magic behind digital therapeutics, to be honest, is not just in the app. It really lies in the evidence. The evidence that you're able to drive behavioral change, the evidence that you're able to, improve clinical outcomes, and you're able to transform patient experiences. And of course, to your point, the very critical piece for payers, for commercial strategies, there is a ton of depth in that evidence that you can get, right? Whether you wanna, you wanna understand prescribing patterns and on how HCPs are dealing with this, whether you want to look at your commercial strategy and you want to look at repositioning your brand of your drug based on the additional features that this digital therapeutic can add to your drug. I mean, I don't think we're even going down the path of software-enhanced drugs, but I think that's also a huge piece on its own.
That's right.
That is very, very significant. And I think the reimbursement piece that varies for software-enhanced drugs, we actually have a futurescape prediction at IDC where we are forecasting for software-enhanced drugs. I won't go into the details, but fundamentally a much better forecast for SEDs versus PDTs for the obvious reasons related to reimbursement. But it's really the evidence that's going to make a huge difference. I believe it's across the value chain. So from a commercial, from a perspective of clinical trials, finding the right patients. And you also brought out the point about, adherence. So I just on a separate note, I think the thing about the digital therapeutic is it's looking at the continuum of care. And when you're embedding a digital therapeutic and looking across the continuum of care, it's getting a nudge at the right time. And that's really, to me, then it's not about enforcing adherence. It's just about making it a way of life.
Yeah.
So all of these pieces of data that you can weave together around the longitudinal patient journey, I think give you very critical insights, whether you're trying to support value-based care and pricing strategies for that, or whether you're trying to look at new indications or new populations, label extension, the opportunities are extensive.
Yeah. Viveca, I'm sure you guys are keeping this very top of mind as you're making the compelling case to pharmaceutical companies, medical device companies, the same sort of components that Nimita's talking about.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it when you were speaking about this like software enhanced drug space. I think it's a way of the future, and we'd be amiss to like kind of miss the opportunities there. As I was saying, we've always studied ours as adjuncts, but we should be looking very specifically at like for a specific drug and its mechanism of action. We can probably create like these neuromodulatory pathways that would work synergistically with how drugs are working. And we've done this before. And then we can, improve outcomes. We can use data. We can use behavioral change modules to actually improve patients' behavior with that particular drug as well, in order to improve outcomes. We can, there's so much possibility within the space, and it's really exciting. And so, yeah.
Well, it's one of those exciting spaces that has commercial benefit, which, drives industry behavior, but has incredible, patient empowerment. Anne Marie, for you, when you think about the patient journey, what does it mean to a patient, especially one where there are long physician wait times? They may not be able to always get the answer that they need, to have an app physically accompanying them that they are able to access at any time, that is giving them that support, that is giving them that connection, that ability to ask and have answered questions. How does that change their ability to feel empowered, responsible, a part of their own care, and supported fundamentally?
That's exactly right. I have first of all, I tend to like to solve my own problems. So maybe I'm going to wait too long to make a phone call to say, should I be worried about this? And they're like, yeah, you're going into anaphylactic shock. You should have you should have gotten out of the house, or you should have called 911 a long time ago. So, I'll go down rabbit holes to try to find a solution before I'm going to call and bother the doctor. And, there are people that are going to push the panic button for everything. And then there are those of us on the other end of the spectrum that think we can solve all of the problems ourselves. So again, having something like this that goes along with the drug or is a standalone product that gives me what I need to know about whatever it is I'm taking, so that I am playing a role in my own care. I am not on a conveyor belt where, okay, this person is saying do this person is administering that person's taking vitals. It's one person, one journey, and everything is being tossed at us, where now it's, no, you know what? I'm going to walk this path with you while you're helping me. And you're going to now put a tool in my hand to allow me to be more independent about what I'm doing. That's a win for patients. And to those that want to push back and say, yeah, you know what, older people. My mom was 83 years old when she died, and she literally was doing things, maybe not necessarily on a phone because it was a little too small or whatever, but she knew how to run up to that computer or on a tablet and get things done. So, and I'll tell you what, there was a point in time where her disease we thought was progressing. Before I even thought of it, she ran to her portal to look at her labs and called me back to report. Those tumor marker study things, those numbers didn't change. So that would mean that this scan, she was putting things together behind the scenes. So, she knew how to go into, I had to change the password on her EHR at one point because she was making me very nervous. But yeah, it just makes this type of technology puts the patient as a partner rather than the thing that we're doing something to. So, yeah.
And I also want to add, it's a thing about access as well. So the fact that it's in your hand, we're all on our phones and we're using it for various reasons, maybe some better than others. So can we take 5 to 10 to 20 minutes per day on our phones to actually impact our healthcare and make it better, and
with as much time as I am spending on my phone, I assure you I can find 20 minutes
to
of
make
it
your life better, right? And there are a lot of components to this type of digital technology, right? All the different things we've talked about today, but that are not accessible to everyone. It's cost, it's geographical barriers, it's lack of physicians or clinicians that are trained to provide certain types of care. Like this type of behavioral change care, I know as a clinician, I don't know how to do that. Yeah. So the fact that someone has these brilliant people at my company and other companies have digitized these behavioral change modules in order to change behavior is I want this for all my patients. I want it for myself, And so I think it's remarkable. It deals with geographical limitations, cost limitations, lack of training, stigma associated with getting psychosocial interventions like this. So it kind of can cover a lot.
Yeah, you jumped into what I wanted to grab from both yourself and Nimita as our closing statements, because what's clear to me before we go to questions from all of you, what's clear to me is Anne Marie wants this. She wants this in everyone's hands. She wants this with more accessibility on more drugs. So for both of you, taking everything we talked about today, if you could compel the industry to investigate this more aggressively, to make this a part of their upcoming programs and treatment plans, what would be the selling point that you would have for now is the time to be considering software enhanced drugs as a key part of their portfolio?
I'm going to jump in, so
Yeah.
it can end with you, Nimita. The one thing I want to say is that I didn't speak about is the safety of this, right? So we study this very, very rigorously. There were no serious adverse events in our clinical studies. There were no device-related, severe adverse events in our studies. These therapies are really, really safe, and they work. And so for me, it's like it's obvious that we need this in our space. Why wouldn't you do this, right? And because we do it in the way we do it and in this regulated way and make sure we're following all the rules with how we do it, I think it could only benefit patients.
Yeah, fantastic.
And providers.
Yeah. Nimita, closing. Oh, go ahead, Amber. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I think it's a game changer. And it's putting empowerment into patients' hands. Yeah. It's transforming people's lives. And it's also transforming pharma as well in many, many different ways with the challenges that that we as an industry are dealing with. So I would say go ahead and adopt. Of course, maintain balance, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with patients' lives. So to your point, ensure that you have rigorous validation, you've demonstrated clinically meaningful benefit. But if you can do that, I think across the value chain from clinical trials to actually, you can go on. I think it has huge potential, and go ahead and adopt.
Fantastic. Compelling. All right, so now is where we get to turn it to our robust audience. Questions and thoughts. And you say it, I'll repeat it for our recorded audience.
So what is the therapy? What's the range of therapies? How do you differentiate that from monitoring?
Okay. So to repeat for the audience, what is the range of therapies and how do you differentiate that from the monitoring of therapies? Did I capture it? Yeah.
Okay, so I can say that Click Therapeutics right now has 3 assets. One is for major depressive disorder. One is for the preventive treatment of episodic migraine. And we're developing one right now in partnership, as I was saying, for schizophrenia, for the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. So those are just our therapeutics. But, different... We're treating the patient, like with these digital therapeutics, right? That is the goal of the therapies, right? So we have indications in these disorders. It's been studied in randomized sham control studies for these disorders. We've hit our primary endpoint on those studies, and we've received FDA authorization for 2 of those assets. And one is like I said, just the top line results are being presented tomorrow. And so those are some of the assets, but we believe that these digital technologies can be used for a variety of different disorders. We believe it could be used for obesity, with GLP-1s, for example. It could be used for oncology to help with the psychiatric manifestations of that disease as well. We believe it could be used for almost every therapy that, has a cognitive, behavioral, or social component, which I would argue most diseases do have. And that was the first part. And the second part of your question? Oh, so monitoring right now. So we don't, right at this time, our therapeutics don't necessarily send, they give reminders to the patient and feedback, but it doesn't send information to the provider directly. But that is something that could easily be incorporated into our platforms, and we're working on developing those like right now because we know that's what people want and need.
Fantastic. Great question.
I'll ask a follow-up question about that monitoring. So, quick little story to go back to this.
I would have to echo you a story. I'm kidding. He works for us, where I'm allowed to abuse him.
So I'm a researcher and stuff, but I also have previously was daily migraine, now it's just daily episodic headache, or daily consistent headache. And I was on a certain CGRP inhibitor, and I was taking it every night, as my neurologist prescribed. And I was 5 months into my 6-month trial of medication, and it was going horribly. And I finally reached out after like a 3-week migraine. I couldn't break, did the whole this stuff didn't go away. But as a researcher but I don't get a migraine. So this just screams to me, okay, well, couldn't this, if I had this through migraine app, would I not be able to potentially see what time of day I'm going to get this? And I was thinking about this from like a clinical trial perspective. I would have said that drug failed initially, but if I had an app that potentially could track this and feed it back to my clinician and say, hey, this guy's getting his migraines every day at this time, maybe we just switch the dosage.
That's it.
Like that, I'm still on that drug today because I would now call it successful. Is there, like, where are you planning to go down that avenue, the feedback?
Absolutely. That's what we want to do.
Find a way to summarize that for the recorded audience.
Oh my gosh, good luck with that.
You were good. Yeah.
Okay, so this researcher is saying that he had a history of chronic migraines and he was started on a CGRP drug, was taking it at the time of day that the physician prescribed and found that he was still experiencing, daily migraines. Then he realized that the half-life of the drug was only 11 hours, so he adjusted the dosage of it to the morning and now has found resolution of the headaches. And he would have considered this to be a treatment failure had he taken it as originally prescribed. And, again, has these infrequent visits with the physician to be able to like talk through some of those side effects or, different times of taking the drug that hopefully a physician would have been able to help you with. And so an app could have helped him identify this earlier on. And I 100% agree with you. And, we're talking about that right now with different companies. Can we put in migraine trackers, tell you look at the time of day you're taking the drug. When are you experiencing your migraines? And this is, again, where it comes to diet, exercise, stress. What are the different things or poor sleep the night before that are triggering, the headaches that patients are having. So we absolutely believe that these tools used together and validated, as we're saying, could definitely change the landscape for patients. I would think so.
I think you just created a case study for success.
So, and what about the quality of your life? Okay, so there's from the seat I'm in right now, that's the biggest change. And you know what? That data, it's there. If it were all captured, somebody would have seen it. Okay, you know what? So, yeah.
Now, follow on to the follow-on. A lot of things you discussed in there are things that I really discussed for many, many years. And I think all the things we had today, we kind of had that click has been around for a long time, right? So rather than being negative, like I said, think positive. We've had barriers that are keeping us from actually doing all the things really well that you're talking about. How do we overcome those barriers or work around them, right? Things like cost and pay, business models, right? Those are all things that are really digital therapeutics is struggling with, right? Philly's gone, here's gone, right? A lot of it, what are the positive things that you think that might come that we can work with, overcome the challenges that keep really realizing?
So I would say one thing is in itself PDRS, the Prescription Drug User Related Software Act. The very fact that it is saying if you can demonstrate clinically meaningful benefit, you can include this on your label, I think is a huge difference. You very rightly pointed out some companies have vanished or have been decimated, and it is a challenge. But in some of these different pieces, and also the whole supplemental NDA part of it, I think these are pieces that will accelerate the process and really facilitate adoption as well by the pharma industry, because if you can put it on your label, then that makes a world of difference. It is simply label extension. It's extending the life of my product. So I think you would see that the industry is a lot more welcoming to these initiatives than it was before.
Yeah. So I think that FDA recognition that this is important to patients. I remember when I was at FDA for many years, we were drafting a guidance on adherence claims and labels. What did sponsors have to do to get those claims? Because it's important for patients and outcomes, and what kind of studies needed to be done. So we're actually, trying to work with FDA right now, trying to figure out what kind of study needs to be done. Can we do a single arm study with a historical comparator, so that we can get that data to update labels, and that would tie into payers and claims. And so we are trying to figure that all out, because we think this is important for patients, and these, we know the drugs have side effects, and we know that our therapeutics don't. So we know there's no drug-drug interactions when we combine it with, a drug. And so I think that's amazing for patients, amazing for, healthcare, and, will decrease costs in the long run.
Also the software enhanced drugs piece.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yes.
Fantastic. Oh, yeah. Sneak it in. Yes, right under the wire.
This is called a continuum of care.
There you go.
Great presentation. I guess like one thing that pops in my mind. So my wife and I, we own a mental health clinic with a couple hundred patients, and I think one of the things that we constantly notice with patients is just sporadic moments of motivation to their own self-care. Like researcher, for instance, I think one thing that kind of stood out was that his drive for figuring out the solution to his own problem was very apparent. So he worked towards finding that solution. So I guess like there's a lot of digital health apps out there, and oftentimes people have sporadic moments of motivation for utilizing these different digital apps. But I guess like what kind of would motivate someone to like pursue?
So the question was, what motivates someone to pursue like using these apps? And I think it's a fantastic question. One we wanted to like hopefully touch upon today is that we actually create something called a digital working alliance with our app. So we actually look at, the trust that you have with your provider that makes you follow what they're saying or take the medication, even though you're not feeling well. Like, what is that, right? What's the mystery behind that? And it's this trust. It's this idea that there's a collaboration between you and your provider, and also that they're educating you and that you guys have common interests and common goals. And so we build that into all of our therapeutics, and we've actually had incredible adherence rates when we look at that. So we do look at engagement, how many minutes are spent in the apps, how much time, and we're seeing like greater than 50%. I want to say even upwards of 70% engagement, which is far higher than what you see with drugs. And even with the question is like with repeated use of these things. So there's something very engaging about the way that we create our platforms. And so we do look at that very closely.
I'm sure you're building in kind of dashboards of, hey, you did a great job.
Absolutely. We're always making you feel good. Always have positive reinforcement.
There will be
Positive
no building
reinforcement
unless
makes
there's
a
a
world of
patient at
difference.
the table
There you
to
go.
say, that's not going to land well. That's not, don't tell us what we're going to like. Because if we're not at the table, chances are you're building something that you may have to adjust because you missed the mark enough that it's going to be a turnoff instead of engaging and getting people into getting people to want to come back. And that's what I'm going to go out on a limb and say everybody in this room is doing that already, right? Right. Yes.
Thank you to all of you for being an engaged audience. Thank you to our fantastic panel. We're getting the hook, but they'll be here if you want to ask questions as we step off the stage. Thank you guys all again, and thank you guys for joining me.
Thank you so much.